The senior instructor's laugh echoed through the hangar as he tapped the red, civilian badge on her chest. "Listen, sweetheart," Colonel Marcus Kane said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This isn't some computer game. Real pilots don't need a 25-year-old girl telling them how to fly." But when Flight 447 went into a death spiral at 30,000 feet with flames erupting from its port engine and Captain Rodriguez unconscious in the cockpit, Dr. Sarah Chen made a decision that would either save 312 lives, or kill them all. The pre-dawn air at Edwards Air Force Base was crisp with the kind of silence that comes before controlled chaos. Sarah Chen adjusted her civilian contractor badge for the third time in 10 minutes, acutely aware of how the red lettering seemed to glow like a warning beacon against her navy blazer. Around her, a dozen Air Force pilots in pristine flight suits moved with the easy confidence of people who belonged exactly where they were. She didn't. At 25, Sarah was the youngest flight systems engineer ever contracted by the military's Advanced Combat Aircraft program. Her MIT doctorate in aeronautical engineering and her revolutionary work on autonomous flight systems had earned her this position, but it hadn't earned her respect. Not here, where call signs and combat experience mattered more than degrees and publications. "Morning, Doc," Captain Lisa Rodriguez nodded as she passed, one of the few pilots who treated Sarah as more than an inconvenience. "Ready for another day of making us look bad with your computer wizardry?" Sarah managed a smile. "Just trying to keep you all in the air, Captain." "That's what I like to hear." Rodriguez's expression grew more serious. "Listen about today's test flight. Attention on deck." The sharp command cut through the morning chatter. Colonel Marcus Kane strode into the briefing room, his chest decorated with enough ribbons to outfit a small parade. At 52, Kane was a legend in military aviation, a former Top Gun instructor with over 4,000 flight hours and a reputation for breaking rules when it suited him. He was also Sarah's biggest obstacle. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kane announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience, "today we're testing the limits of human endurance and machine capability. The F-35X prototype will be pushed beyond anything we've attempted before." Sarah's tablet chimed softly with an incoming data stream. She frowned as she reviewed the morning's flight parameters. The aggressive test profile Kane had designed would stress the aircraft's systems in ways that concerned her. Her simulations showed potential points of failure that hadn't been addressed in the official safety review. She raised her hand tentatively. "Colonel Kane, I've been analyzing the flight data, and I think we need to discuss the fuel consumption rates during the high-G maneuvers. The models suggest." Kane's cold stare cut her off mid-sentence. "Dr. Chen," he said, emphasizing her civilian title like it was something distasteful, "I've been flying combat missions since you were learning to drive. I think I can handle a test flight." A few pilots chuckled, but Sarah noticed Captain Rodriguez shift uncomfortably in her seat. "Sir, with respect, Dr. Chen's simulations have been remarkably accurate in previous tests. Maybe we should." "Captain Rodriguez," Kane's voice carried a warning, "are you questioning my judgment?" "No, sir. Just suggesting we review all available data." Kane's smile was razor-thin. "The only data that matters is what happens when rubber meets sky. Dr. Chen's computer models are interesting academic exercises, but they can't account for the reality of combat aviation." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. "Colonel, the thermal stress indicators show critical concerns at the altitude and speed combinations you're planning. If the port engine experiences even minor fluctuations..." "Enough." Kane's voice boomed through the briefing room. "Dr. Chen, you're here as an observer. Your job is to take notes and stay out of the way while real pilots do real work. Is that clear?" The room fell silent. Every eye was on Sarah as she met Kane's challenging stare. She could back down, apologize, return to her corner and her tablet. It would be the safe choice, the expected choice. Instead she stood up. "Crystal clear, Colonel," she said, her voice carrying further than she expected. "I'll observe from the control room and monitor the systems I helped design. But for the record, I want it noted that I strongly recommend reducing the test parameters by 15% to maintain safe operational margins." Kane's face darkened. "Noted and dismissed. Captain Rodriguez, you're taking the F-35X up at 0800 hours. Let's show our civilian consultant what real flying looks like." As the briefing dispersed, Sarah gathered her materials with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear but from frustration. She had spent 3 years designing the flight control systems for this aircraft, had run thousands of simulations, had identified every potential failure point. But her expertise meant nothing here because she wore the wrong uniform. "Sarah." Captain Rodriguez appeared beside her as the room emptied. You were right to speak up. Kane's pushing too hard, too fast. Doesn't matter, Sarah replied, sliding her tablet into its case. I'm just the civilian who doesn't understand real flying. For what it's worth, Rodriguez said quietly, I've read your technical reports. Your understanding of flight dynamics is better than most pilots I know. And your safety record speaks for itself, not one system failure in 3 years of testing. Sarah looked up, surprised by the praise. Thank you, Captain. That means more than you know. Just promise me you'll keep monitoring from the control room. If you see anything at all, don't hesitate to speak up. Protocol be damned. 2 hours later, Sarah stood in the control room watching the F-35X taxi to the runway. The morning sun glinted off the aircraft's stealth coating as Captain Rodriguez ran through her final pre-flight checks. On Sarah's monitoring station, dozens of data streams painted a real-time picture of the aircraft's condition. Tower, this is Viper 1 requesting clearance for takeoff. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the speakers. Viper 1, you are cleared for takeoff. Wind is 0-90 at 12 knots. Sarah watched the F-35X accelerate down the runway, its twin engines leaving heat shimmer in the desert air. The aircraft lifted smoothly, retracting its landing gear as it climbed toward the test altitude of 40,000 feet. Viper 1 is airborne, Rodriguez reported. All systems nominal, beginning climb to test altitude. For the first 20 minutes, everything proceeded normally. Rodriguez took the aircraft through a series of standard maneuvers, establishing baseline performance before Kane's aggressive test sequence would begin. Sarah's displays showed all systems functioning within normal parameters. Control, Viper 1. Rodriguez's voice carried the professional calm of an experienced test pilot. Reaching 40,000 feet, beginning high-speed run. Accelerating to Mach 1.8. Sarah's attention focused on the engine performance data. Both power plants were operating smoothly, but she noticed subtle fluctuations in the port engine's fuel flow, exactly the kind of anomaly her simulations had predicted. Viper 1, we're seeing minor irregularities in your port engine fuel flow, the lead flight controller reported. Are you experiencing any handling issues? Negative, control. Aircraft feels solid. Continuing acceleration. Sarah's fingers flew across her tablet, running real-time analysis of the engine data. The fluctuations were growing more pronounced, following the exact pattern her models had predicted. She needed to speak up. Flight control, she said, activating her headset. I'm seeing concerning trends in the port engine combustion efficiency. Recommend we consider aborting the high-stress portion of the test. Colonel Kane's voice cut through the channel like a blade. Dr. Chin, you are not authorized to make tactical recommendations during flight operations. Return to observation mode immediately. Sir, the data clearly shows. The data shows minor variations well within operational tolerances, Kane interrupted. Captain Rodriguez is one of our most experienced pilots. If she says the aircraft is performing normally, then it is. Through her headset, Sarah heard Rodriguez's voice. Control, I am noticing some roughness in the port engine during high G turns. It's subtle but definitely there. Kane's response was immediate. Viper 1, your engine parameters are green across the board. Continue with the test sequence. Sarah stared at her displays in disbelief. Kane was ignoring both her technical analysis and the pilot's own observations. The port engine was developing exactly the kind of combustion instability she had warned about, but Kane's ego wouldn't allow him to acknowledge it. Viper 1 beginning vertical climb sequence, Rodriguez reported. Pulling 7 gs. 8 gs. Port engine roughness is increasing significantly. Maintain test profile, Viper 1, Kane ordered. Push through to maximum performance parameters. Sarah's blood ran cold as she watched the engine data cascade toward critical levels. The combustion chamber pressure was fluctuating wildly, and the turbine temperature was climbing beyond safe limits. She had minutes, maybe less, before catastrophic failure. Control, this is Dr. Chin, she said, abandoning all pretense of protocol. You need to abort this test immediately. The port engine is approaching critical failure. If Captain Rodriguez continues this profile, she's going to lose that engine. Dr. Chin, you are hereby ordered to cease all communications. Kane's voice was furious. Security, remove the civilian contractor from the control room. Sir, please just look at the data. Now. 2 security guards appeared at Sarah's station, but before they could escort her out, Rodriguez's voice crackled through the speakers with a new tone, tension replacing professional calm. Control, I've got serious vibration through the entire airframe. Port engine is definitely not happy. Requesting permission to reduce power and return to base. Kane hesitated for just a moment that would change everything. Negative Viper 1. You're almost at maximum test parameters. Push through. That's an order. Sarah watched in horror as the port engine's temperature spiked into the red zone. Her predictive algorithms were screaming warnings that no one else could see because they were too focused on the standard displays. Colonel Kane, she said, her voice cutting through the control room chatter, in 30 seconds that engine is going to experience catastrophic failure. Captain Rodriguez needs to shut it down now. That's enough. Kane roared. Security, I want her out of here immediately. But it was too late. Control, mayday, mayday. Rodriguez's voice exploded through the speakers. Port engine fire. I've got flames and complete power loss on the left side. The control room erupted in controlled chaos as alarms began blaring. On the main display, the F-35X was visible as a tiny speck trailing black smoke against the brilliant blue sky. Viper 1, initiate emergency engine shutdown and fire suppression, the lead controller ordered, his previous comm replaced by urgent professionalism. Already done, Control. Fire suppression activated, but I'm getting no response. The fire's not going out and I'm losing hydraulic pressure. This bird is getting hard to control. Sarah pushed past the security guards and returned to her station. Her displays showed the cascading system failures she had predicted. The engine fire was spreading to hydraulic lines, and the flight control computers were beginning to shut down backup systems. She needs to get on the ground immediately, Sarah said to anyone who would listen. The fire is going to reach the main fuel lines in less than 10 minutes. Kane appeared at her shoulder, his face pale. Can she make it back to Edwards? Sarah's calculations were brutal in their clarity. Not at current descent rate with only one engine. She's too heavy with fuel, and the damaged systems are creating too much drag. Then what are her options? Sarah's fingers flew across her tablet, running emergency landing calculations. There was only one possibility and it was barely possible at all. There's a small civilian airfield about 40 miles southeast, Desert Springs Municipal. Single runway, barely long enough, but it's her only shot. Kane grabbed the microphone. Viper 1, we're vectoring you to Desert Springs Municipal Airport. Single runway, 5,000 feet. Can you make it? Rodriguez's voice was strained now, the aircraft obviously fighting her. I'll have to dump fuel and pray. This thing is flying like a brick with the asymmetric thrust. Captain, Sarah said, keying her own microphone, I've run the numbers. You need to maintain exactly 180 knots on final approach. Any slower and you'll stall, any faster and you'll overshoot the runway. Copy that, document 180 knots. Anything else? Sarah's mind raced through the emergency procedures she had memorized but never hoped to use. The damaged flight controls are going to want to roll left. You'll need constant right rudder input to maintain heading. And don't deploy flaps until the last possible moment, the hydraulic system might not have enough pressure. Understanding. Sarah. Rodriguez's voice carried a note of vulnerability Sarah had never heard before. I'm going to need you to talk me through this. The standard approach procedures aren't going to work with these system failures. Kane looked at Sarah, his earlier arrogance replaced by something that might have been respect. Dr. Chen, can you guide her in? Sarah took a deep breath, thinking of all the simulations she had run, all the emergency scenarios she had studied. This was why she had become an engineer. Not for recognition or glory but for moments like this when knowledge could mean the difference between life and death. Yes, sir. I can bring her home. Viper 1, you're now under Dr. Chen's guidance for emergency approach. Follow her instructions exactly. Copy that, Control. Doc, I'm all ears. Sarah watched the F-35X's progress on radar, a tiny blip crawling across the screen toward the small civilian airport. The aircraft was losing altitude faster than she'd like, and the engine fire was still burning despite the suppression system. Captain, I need you to start your fuel dump now. You're too heavy for a single-engine approach on that short runway. Fuel dump initiated. Sarah, I'm showing some pretty scary readings on my remaining engine. Temperature is climbing. Sarah's heart sank as she saw the data. The remaining engine was being pushed beyond its limits trying to compensate for the failed port engine. If it overheated and shut down, Rodriguez would be flying a glider with the aerodynamic characteristics of a brick. What's your altitude and distance to the airport? 12,000 feet, about 15 miles out. But this remaining engine is running hot. I don't think it's going to last much longer. Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. 15 miles was too far to glide, but if the engine failed, Rodriguez would have no choice. She needed to start setting up for the approach now while she still had power. Lisa, Sarah said, using the pilot's first name for the first time, I need you to start your descent immediately. Don't wait for the normal approach pattern. Begin descending at 1,500 feet per minute. That's pretty aggressive for a single-engine approach. I know, but if your remaining engine quits, you'll need the altitude for gliding distance. Trust me on this. Copy that. Beginning descent, 1,500 feet per minute. Through the control room speakers, they could hear the strain in Rodriguez's voice as she fought to maintain control of the damaged aircraft. The F-35X was not designed to fly on one engine, especially not with the level of damage it had sustained. Sarah, Rodriguez called, I can see the airport. Runway's in sight, but it looks awfully short from up here. It's going to be tight, Sarah admitted, but you can do this. What's your current altitude and speed? 6,000 feet, 200 knots. That remaining engine is really starting to run rough. Okay, reduce speed to 190 knots and continue descent. You're going to fly a straight-in approach. No pattern, no delays. We can't risk that engine quitting while you're maneuvering. Copy. 190 knots, straight-in approach. Sarah's calculations showed Rodriguez would reach the runway threshold with maybe 500 feet to spare, if the engine held out. If it didn't, she'd be coming in dead stick, and the mathematics of that scenario were unforgiving. 4,000 feet, Rodriguez reported. Engine's getting worse. I'm seeing oil pressure fluctuations now. Maintain current descent rate. You're doing great, Lisa. Almost there. Colonel Kane moved to stand beside Sarah, watching the radar display intently. Can she make it? If the engine holds out for another 3 minutes, yes. If not. Sarah didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what would happen if the remaining engine failed. 2,000 feet, Rodriguez called. I can see the runway clearly now. It really does look short. It's long enough. Lisa, I need you to reduce speed to 180 knots now. And remember, no flaps until you're absolutely committed to the runway. 180 knots. Roger that. Sarah, that engine just hiccuped. Oil pressure's dropping fast. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. The engine was failing and Rodriguez was still 500 feet above the runway. If it quit now, she might not have enough altitude to reach the pavement. Lisa, you're almost there. 500 feet above the runway. Start your final approach speed reduction to 160 knots. Reducing to 160. That engine doesn't sound good, Sarah. It's really struggling. I know. Just hold on for 30 more seconds. 100 feet, Rodriguez called. Deploying flaps, now. The flaps extended partially. The damaged hydraulic system couldn't provide full extension, but it was enough to help slow the aircraft. Looking good, Lisa. You're lined up perfectly. 50 feet, 30 feet, 20. The F-35X's wheels touched down hard on the Desert Springs runway, immediately followed by the screech of brakes being applied to their maximum. Black smoke poured from the tires as Rodriguez fought to bring the aircraft to a stop before running out of runway. She's down, someone in the control room shouted. But Sarah's eyes remained fixed on the radar display, watching the F-35X's ground speed. The aircraft was decelerating but slowly. Too slowly. Come on, Lisa, she whispered. Stop, stop, stop. The radar showed the aircraft still moving as it approached the end of the runway. For a terrifying moment, it looked like Rodriguez would roll off the pavement and into the desert beyond. Then, finally, the blip on the screen stopped moving. Viper, 1 is stopped. Rodriguez's voice came through the speakers, exhaustion and relief evident in every word. I'm down safe. Fire crews are approaching. Sarah. There was a pause. Thank you. You saved my life. The control room erupted in cheers and applause. Sarah slumped in her chair, suddenly aware of how tense she had been for the past hour. Her hands were shaking as the adrenaline began to wear off. Colonel Kane appeared beside her, his expression unreadable. Dr. Chen, he said quietly, I owe you an apology, and probably a lot more than that. Sarah looked up at him, still processing what had just happened. Sir? You were right. About everything. The engine parameters, the failure progression, the emergency procedures. If I had listened to you from the beginning, none of this would have happened. Captain Rodriguez is safe, Sarah said simply. That's what matters. Kane was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. What matters is that we had someone in this room who understood what was happening and had the courage to speak up despite being told to shut up and sit down. That's what matters. He straightened to his full height and, to Sarah's complete amazement, snapped to attention and saluted her. "Colonel?" Sarah said, confused. "Dr. Chin, I'm recommending you for immediate enrollment in the Air Force Test Pilot Program. We need pilots who understand aircraft systems the way you do. We need people who can see problems before they become disasters." "Sir, I'm not even military." "That can be fixed. The question is, are you interested in learning to fly the planes you design?" Sarah thought of her childhood dreams of flight, of the rejections and dismissals she had faced, of the moment when she had guided Rodriguez safely to the ground using nothing but knowledge and determination. "Yes, sir," she said. "I'm very interested." 6 months later, Second Lieutenant Sarah Chen walked across the tarmac at Edwards Air Force Base toward her assigned F-35X. The morning sun glinted off the pilot's wings newly pinned to her flight suit, and the aircraft waiting for her bore fresh paint and completely redesigned engine systems. Systems based on her recommendations and implemented under her supervision. As she approached the aircraft, she saw Colonel Kane waiting beside the ladder. His expression was proud as he watched her complete her pre-flight inspection. "Ready for your first solo flight in the X model, Lieutenant?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, settling her helmet under her arm. "Though I have to admit, it's strange being on this side of the control room." "Just remember," Kane said with a smile, "if you get into trouble up there, we've got one of the best flight engineers in the business monitoring your systems from the ground." Sarah looked toward the control room and saw Captain Rodriguez, now Major Rodriguez, giving her a thumbs up through the window. The pilot who had trusted her guidance during the darkest moment of her career was now the one who would talk her through any emergency that might arise. "Sir," Sarah said as she prepared to climb into the cockpit, "I want you to know that I'll never forget what you taught me." "What's that, Lieutenant?" "That sometimes the most important thing isn't following protocol, it's knowing when to break it for the right reasons." Kane nodded approvingly. "Just make sure you come back in one piece. We've got a lot more aircraft to test, and I want our best pilot engineer flying them." As Sarah strapped herself into the cockpit of the F-35X, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From dismissed civilian contractor to Air Force test pilot, from being told she didn't belong to being trusted with the most advanced aircraft in the world. "Tower, this is Falcon 1 requesting clearance for takeoff," she said into her radio. "Falcon 1, you are cleared for takeoff. Wind is 0-90 at 10 knots. Have a good flight, Lieutenant." Sarah advanced the throttles and felt the familiar surge of power as the F-35X accelerated down the runway. As the aircraft lifted off and climbed toward the desert sky, she smiled inside her helmet. She had finally found where she belonged, not despite being different but because of it. In the control room, Colonel Kane watched the F-35X disappear into the morning haze and shook his head in wonder. Sometimes the best pilots came from the most unexpected places. And sometimes the person everyone dismissed as just a civilian turned out to be exactly what they needed. The radio crackled to life. "Control, Falcon 1. All systems nominal. Beginning test sequence." Kane picked up the microphone. "Copy that, Falcon 1. We're monitoring your systems from here. Fly safe." "Always do, sir. After all, I know exactly how these things work." And in that moment, Kane realized that Sarah Chen had taught him something far more valuable than flight procedures or emergency protocols. She had taught him that expertise comes in many forms, and wisdom means knowing when to listen, regardless of who's doing the talking. The F-35X climbed steadily into the clear desert sky, its systems performing flawlessly under the guidance of a pilot who understood every bolt, wire, and line of code that kept it airborne. Sarah Chen had found her place in the sky, and the sky was better for having her there.